when Hurricane Maria happened, if I didn't do something, it was going to be one of those things that I kind of regretted forever.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Peter O. Estévez Show. This is your host, Peter O. Estévez. Today, I have with me none other than Tony Delgado. Tony Delgado is a great friend, but more than anything, he's a Latino American computer programmer. He's an investor, a businessman. Tony is known for his work in Puerto Rico as an entrepreneur and the startups of a startup ecosystem. In 2017, after Hurricane Maria, Tony quit his job at a VC investment firm, moved to Puerto Rico, and funded Disrupt, a movement focused on bringing technology, innovation, entrepreneurship to Latin America. And he's also the founder of Latino Wall Street, the #1 educational platform in Spanish to learn about a stock market. Tony, welcome to the Peter O. Estévez Show. What an honor, what a privilege to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for having me on, Pete.
It's good to see you, my friend. You know, last time you and I were in person, I actually flew to Puerto Rico to meet with you, and we had an incredible conversation. And you had just been in Puerto Rico a few months, right before you were going to do the TEDx in Puerto Rico, and you were still single. Now you're married, your wife is pregnant, and you had just blown up. So good to have you, Tony. Great.
Likewise, my friend. Yeah, I remember that conversation where we were talking on the phone, and you were, hundreds of miles away. Like, oh yeah, you want to have a meeting tomorrow? We can have lunch. And I was like, wait, what? And you literally treated airplanes like it was an Uber ride, and you were here the next day. It's definitely inspirational, but yeah, man, a lot has changed, but a lot of things are still the same, and we're still here trying to do the best that we can, one day at a time.
Who is Tony Delgado? Where did Tony Delgado grow up, and where did he get that passion as a humanitarian?
Well, I grew up in northern New Jersey, right outside of Manhattan, and I grew up in a primarily Latino neighborhood where ESL, English, was as a second language classes were all throughout my schools. So you would have some kids who completely didn't speak English at all. And then some kids that did, and they were a little bit more bilingual, right? And it's so funny because the word disrupt, right? When I decided to move to Puerto Rico and call my company that, my mom was like, oh yeah, all the teachers said you were very disruptive in class. But I was always smart, but I was always willing to question authority, right? So if a teacher was giving a presentation and I thought I had a better answer, whether or not it was true or not, I thought I had a better answer, I would be the first one to raise my hand and question authority and push the limits and push the boundaries. And I remember my kindergarten, kind of grade school years, my house was right next to the school. So I could literally at lunchtime walk home and go home, and sometimes I wouldn't come back, and sometimes I'd take a couple of kids with me, right? Or if I was missing a toy or missing a ball or something or playing cards, I could literally just sneak right next door and go to my house. And it was something that I think the other kids didn't have. But I was always breaking the rules for better or for worse. By the time I graduated from high school, I had went to 12 different schools. So on average, I only lasted a year or two in each location. Now, some of that is from shifting to middle school to high school, but a lot of that was bouncing around from private school to public school to the gifted program of the public school back to the normal program of the public school. So I definitely spent my adolescence testing the rules and testing the barriers, and it's definitely been an exercise in adulthood, in responsibility and maturity, to learn how to break the rules in the right way and not the wrong way. And that's the thing that we teach at Disrupt. That's the thing that we teach at Latino Wall Street, is to think differently and break the rules that need to be broken.
I love that. And the reality is that we come from a culture where we don't question authority. Okay. We have a long history of hierarchy, and there's even in the family, it's from the top down, and we never get to question that. And for you as a young boy to be able to question a system that today we know is broken. Okay? Today we know that the school system, that the educational system, it needs to be disrupted for many, many reasons, because not everyone learns the same way, right? Not everyone has the ability to take in information or to channel information the same way. And you may have been like many thousands of kids that we know about today that have been shone, the light has been shone upon them, that maybe they're too smart, they're too active, they're bored in the classroom because they're not getting the right information that they need. It's either too slow or they're way too advanced for a system that is outdated. Would you agree with that?
I mean, the school system was designed for factory workers, right? It wasn't designed for innovators. It wasn't designed for people that break the rules. But in business and in life, the people that break the rules are the ones that are hyper successful, right? Think about the iPhone. The iPhone, when it came out, broke all the rules. It had no keyboard, right? Everybody had a Sidekick or a BlackBerry with a full QWERTY keyboard, and they were like, who are these crazy guys breaking the rules of cell phones, right? So it's the innovators, it's the people that do things differently that then end up excelling in business and in life. And I remember going to college, and I didn't last too long in college. I got kicked out of it within the first year. But when I went to college, I got kicked out because I brought friends onto campus, and my friends were a lot worse than me. So I consider myself a little bit of a badass, but I hung out with a lot of people a lot worse than me. And I remember when I was leaving the campus, there was a song from Cameron, right? He's a rapper from the Dipset, right? And there's a lot of things that I criticize about hip hop music, but this one quote really stuck with me. He said, they want you to go to school, get $100,000 into debt, and then get out after 4 years, 8 years, and then get a job making $30,000 a year. Right. And then he says, how the hell am I going to, drive nice cars and fly on private jets and go to Miami 5 times a year just doing that? Right. That doesn't work financially. And he used a little bit more vulgar language than I'm using now. But that was the gist of it. And I remember early on, one of the questions that I had even in grade school, I was like, hey, how much does a teacher make? I like my teachers. They're really cool. How much do they make? It's like, hey, $30,000 a year, $40,000 a year. That's the starting salary. And then as I became an adolescent, I was really blessed that Bill Clinton came to our school and gave us computers. So I had the internet at a really early age. And then my mother was also a computer programmer. So we had computers and the internet in the household back when people really didn't have that. There were no smartphones. And I started selling things on eBay and Amazon when I was 15, 16 years old, and I was able to make $30,000 in a month. And I was like, wait, if I can make this in a month and I'm just a kid, then how am I going to be taking advice from the teacher that's making that in a year? And, again, it goes back to think differently. It also goes back to the power of the digital economy. Whereas, and that's why I try not to judge, our older generations, because before the internet, it would actually be really hard to do that. It'd be really hard for a 15-year-old kid selling baseball cards on the street to make $30,000 in a month. Absolutely. Right? Possible, but highly unlikely. But with the power of the internet, now I wasn't only selling things to kids on my block, I was selling things to people on all blocks, all cities, all around the world. And that's the power of the digital economy. That's the power of the internet. And that's why I'm so excited about where we are now. Because now you don't need to move to a big city. You don't need to go to a big school. You don't need to come from a wealthy family. If you have the internet, you have unlimited potential and earning potential in the palm of your hand with a smartphone.
Absolutely. And so tell me about how, beyond the fact that Bill Clinton donated computers to your school system, your mother was a programmer, and then you became a very successful programmer. Okay. And after college, you went to work for a VC investment firm, and Maria hits Puerto Rico, devastates Puerto Rico, and all that knowledge in programming, all that knowledge in computers, you pick up and leave for Puerto Rico. Tell us about that journey, and why did you decide to do that? And where did you get that humanitarian spirit to do that?
Yeah, well, I guess just to backtrack, like how I got into tech. I mean, I had a computer at a young age, and then I always saw tech as the way, as that gateway drug to earning a really high salary without necessarily having to go to college. And that's still true today, probably more true than ever, right? The technology field, because these skills are not taught in schools anyway, it's a very much self-taught industry. So my venture into tech was me looking for financial freedom, me looking to climb corporate America and climb that ladder without necessarily having a degree, because I had been kicked out of college. So I worked for a lot of different firms. I worked for IT firms that did consulting. We worked on multi-million-dollar projects for Whole Foods, LG, Toshiba, Pfizer. I mean, you name it. We really, through working for different IT consulting and then marketing and digital consulting firms, I worked with some incredible companies, and I learned a lot. And I learned, what does corporate infrastructure look like? What does technology from a business perspective look like? And I remember my first job, I was getting paid about $15 an hour, but I was getting billed out at $250 an hour. And I would see the invoices, and I would be able to look at them and say, oh my God, well, I'm worth $250 an hour, because that's how much I'm getting billed out at, right? And you know, it didn't matter that my employer was paying me less at the time. I was getting billed out at that rate, and that was showing me the power of the skills and the knowledge that I had. But to backtrack, you know, in New York City back in the early 2000s, you know, there wasn't a big tech ecosystem startup. I don't even think the word entrepreneur was like a thing. There was no Gary Vee. There was no Instagram. So being an entrepreneur, being into tech, and that being a cool thing that people aspired to be, was literally non-existent. If you turned on rap music, if you turned on popular culture, I mean, we glorified drug dealers and stripping, going to a strip club. And if you listen to the lyrics of the songs from my era, they really did not glorify anything in business. I think that's changing, and there's a lot more entrepreneurship in the culture, and thanks to people, you know, like Gary Vee and Grant Cardone, etc., who are making entrepreneurship cool. But when I grew up, there was no one to really look to. And then I went to a conference. I went to an event. I invested $700 into an event ticket, and then a few more thousand traveling across the country, going to California, to Silicon Valley, because I knew that that's where the tech was. I knew that that's where Google and Twitter and Facebook and all these really big companies were there, and I knew I wanted to go there. It was almost like a trip to the nerd motherland, if you will, right? And there wasn't a lot of that in New York City at the time, but I knew that it was in California. So I went to this event from a company named Twilio, and I met all these amazing people, all these innovators, and they're raising money for their startups. They're raising millions and millions of dollars for these companies, and they're creating apps, and they're creating websites, they're creating all this stuff. And then I'll never forget, it was one of the founders of Twitch. He was speaking on stage, and he points to everyone in the audience, and he says, you guys, when you guys go back to wherever you're from, you guys need to make more money, because there's more people that want to make things than people that know how to make them. And you guys are the hackers, you guys are the creators, you guys know how to make stuff. And it was at that point, and this was, you know, maybe 10 years ago now, but I had that shift and learning that, wow, this tool of using the internet is something that they pay millions of dollars for by investing into companies and startups. Fast forward, I started working for a VC firm. I was the CTO at Gerard Adams' accelerator called Founders, and we were working in the inner cities of Newark, New Jersey. So we were working with blacks and Latinos and minority-owned companies and founders who were creating apps, creating websites, and creating these companies. But they were kind of like the unlikely entrepreneur, right? It was like the female or like the state school dropout, not the Ivy League dropout, right? And I used to joke and say I wasn't the CTO of one company. I was the CTO of like 100, because we had all these companies. Some of them we funded, and some of them were just part of our community. And we were giving advice and guidance and mentorship to all these different companies. And so at that time, we were still working on social impact, but we were doing it in Newark, New Jersey, in the inner cities of Newark. And then when Hurricane Maria happened, I came down to Puerto Rico, and I kind of knew my grandfather's from Arecibo, Puerto Rico. I used to come to the island as a kid, and then when he passed away, I hadn't came back. But I always sort of had in the back of my mind like, I want to come back. And then I knew when Hurricane Maria happened, if I didn't do something, it was going to be one of those things that I kind of regretted forever. Right? And I might have never came back to the island after that. I came back a few times sort of as a tourist, but never full time. And so then when that event happened, the first thing we did was we bought a pallet of water and we sent it over. So me and a friend of mine, Eufemio Perez, another New Yorican from New York, we bought a pallet of water, we put it on a ship, and we sent it. Then when we turned on the news a few weeks later, we saw that the supplies weren't really getting where they needed to go. And that's when I met David, who runs a tourism company here in Puerto Rico, and Hugo Sanchez, the founder of the Modi app, another Puerto Rican entrepreneur. And we decided to take a trip here and give out the water ourselves, right? If we're buying water and we're sending it and it's not getting distributed, well, then, F it. We're hopping on a plane and we're going to go and go door to door. And that's exactly what we did. We came to Puerto Rico, we went door to door. We gave away 300 solar panel lights, small lights that you can charge a cell phone with and get and have a flashlight at night, and then cases of water. And we weren't a big nonprofit, we weren't a big organization. It was just a bunch of crazy entrepreneurs who decided to take action. And when I came to Puerto Rico and we were doing this humanitarian work, I realized that the same internet connection that I had used my entire life to make money online, they still had it. They didn't even have power in a lot of these cities, but my cell phone worked and I had Wi-Fi. And I knew that if I had Wi-Fi and I was able to make money off of the internet, well, then that means the same person that didn't even have power actually had the power of Wi-Fi, had the power of the internet, and they could learn to code or learn marketing or learn e-commerce or eBay or dropshipping or cryptocurrency, right? And they could learn these same digital skills that I had learned as a kid and apply them, right? And if you look at immigration, right, which is a big topic in the news, media, politics nowadays. But if you look at immigration happened because of the Industrial Revolution, because you geographically had to move to a big city to make more money, right? But now that's not the case. If you have internet, you can make money from anywhere in the world. So that's when I decided to move to Puerto Rico and start this movement. And that's pretty much how we're on this podcast now.
Well, that's an incredible story, but I want to go back and I want to dissect some of what you said. I want to unpack some of what you said because there's a lot of lessons to be learned. Okay. Latino kid, single parent home without a college degree, ends up in an environment, okay, where he's surrounded by founders of many, many startups in Silicon Valley because he made a commitment to make a $700 investment. Okay. And if anything, we can unpack anything out of this whole conversation is that you made an investment that potentially change your life forever and ever. Okay. Talk to us about the importance and investing of yourself, because I think that's something that is very dear to my heart. Okay. You have also named a lot of the same people that we know, a lot of the people that have paved the way and had made uncool things cool. Okay. For example, entrepreneurship has been around for years. Okay. For years and years and years. The word is new. Okay. The word is cool. Okay. But our parents, our culture, are entrepreneurs by default. Okay. Out of necessity. My father had multiple jobs just to feed 13 children. Okay. Just to keep a roof over our head. He had multiple side hustles, which is also a cool word. Back when we were growing up, it was not so cool to have a side hustle. You were looked as being shady or if you didn't follow the system, if you didn't follow the rules, okay, you became an outcast in society. Today's cool to have a side hustle. Today's cool to be an entrepreneur. Today's cool to do disruptive things. Okay. And you have proven that over and over. But I think some of the lessons along the way, you said that you don't disrespect authority or the old traditional our elders, right, for lack of a better word. But everything that you've done has been disruptive to what we as a culture have been traditionally accustomed to doing. And to me, that's very important to talk about, because I still believe there's thousands of Anthony's out there and Peters out there in the world that have not seen through this. They have not had that breakthrough. Okay. They have break and they are broken, but they have not broken through. They have not moved to the other side. They are still on the sidelines waiting for something to happen, something to change. And typically it's because we are being held back by our beliefs. Okay. So question, I want to go into investing. Where did that idea come from for you to invest $700 in yourself? Because you could have gone out there and buy a new pair of Nikes. You could have gone out there and bought a new Gucci belt. You could have gone out there and flown to Miami and had a nice weekend. Why did you decide to invest in yourself? And what's the importance of investing in yourself, Anthony?
Yeah, so I mean, that was probably one of the first high ticket seminars that I went to in my life, but it definitely wasn't the last, right? And every single time that I invested into myself, I took it as an opportunity to level up, right? And, you know, maybe that was part of not going to college or not completing college, right? And wanting to have accreditations, wanting to have, you know, certifications and learning and things under my belt, because I was very much self-taught. But in addition to that, it was just getting around different people and being able to think different. And it was funny because a lot of these rooms that I ended up in, I was very uncomfortable. I was probably the only inner city Latino kid there, at a lot of these events. But I also, you know, I grew up in the Catholic Church, so I have my manners, and I would go to these events, and I would just be a sponge. And that particular event, the Twilio event, I ended up going every single year for about 5 years in a row, and I went so many years in a row that they made me an official ambassador of the company, and I started getting invited to private dinners, and my tickets ended up being comped and all these crazy things years later, because I was so loyal to the brand, and still am. We still use their technology in our companies. But the importance of investing in yourself, it's a hack. It's a way to reprogram your brain. I mean, if you look at your brain, it's just a computer. And one of the guys on my team, he just did a seminar, a similar weekend seminar, 3 days, you know, close to $1,000 investment. And I was like, okay, great. You put a new operating system on that. I mean, people will put a new operating system on their phone. And they'll do the updates on their Instagram, but they won't try to do an update on their brain, the most important tool that they have. So I really do see it as that. And it's a shortcut. I mean, yeah, I guess I could have read a bunch of books or started 20 more companies and had them fail, right? Or I can go to Silicon Valley for a weekend and invest in myself, and in 3 days be exposed to things that I probably never would have. And I mean, since then, I attended the Rutgers coding boot camp to increase my coding skills. I already knew how to code, but I invested $10,000 to go to a 6-month program. And you know what? When I did that, I told all my old friends that I used to go to the nightclub with, hey guys, we're not going to be going out on Friday. If you guys want to come Sunday morning for a Starbucks, we can do that. But I just dropped 10 G's on this program, and I'm going to freaking finish it, and I'm going to be top of my class. So I invested $10,000 on a 6-month program, and then fast forward a few years later, I invested $10,000 on a 5-day program about business, right? And so when I invested that first $700, I probably never would have thought, oh my God, I'm going to end up investing $10,000 on a weekend seminar, right? But every single time that I've done that, I've taken away at least one thing. You don't have to learn everything at a seminar. You don't have to learn everything at an event. But if you make one connection, or if you learn one thing that you can then apply in your business over and over and over again, then in my opinion, it's all worth it. And a lot of times the things that you learn, they're not even necessarily the thing that you signed up for, right? When I went to Silicon Valley, I learned all sorts of things because I was in that ecosystem. I learned that tech companies could have billboards. I never even knew that, right? I got off the plane and I saw Uber, which didn't used to run billboards anywhere but California, and WordPress, the blogging software, had billboards, and Slack. And I was like, oh my God, this is a thing, right? So more than just, hey, you're going to learn about X thing, it's also who do you become, right? Who do you get to become on the other end? And to, I guess circle back to your first point, if anything, I'm a testament that your past does not have to define your future. You get to define that.
I love that. And there's a couple of things that I want to touch on because they're so important. And you're just giving us a whole bunch of nuggets that our audience are going to get incredible value from. But one of the things that you said is that when you go to an event like this, you have an opportunity to meet other people. Okay. And today I'm an incredible believer that today is about the who and not the how. Okay. If you know the who that knows the how, you're in. Okay. And you either create a collaboration with the who that knows the how about the thing that you don't know how to do, and they can do better than you can. And you don't have to invest the time, the resources, the energy in learning something that you may only need once or twice or three times or whatever. But now you have an expert in this field. And this is where you can create incredible collaborations and meet incredible people. I did that very, very early on before your generation, even in the 90s. I had to pay literally thousands and thousands of dollars to go to the executive program at Harvard University. But I went there with one thing in mind. I wanted to learn strategic planning, but I also wanted to meet people that were running companies bigger than my company that I could learn from, that I could connect with, that I could collaborate with them in the future. And, my break into going back into my country and building companies in the energy, oil and gas field, and then in other acquisitions came from a member of my class at Harvard University that later connected me to one of the largest conglomerates in South Korea. And they became my number one customer in Mexico. And they opened up a brand new market that I would have never imagined or dreamed of. So that's the kind of relationships that you don't need to go to Harvard anymore to do that. You don't need to go to college to do that. You can do that on a weekend mastermind. You can do that on a 3-day seminar. You can do that on an online course. There's an incredible amount of opportunities of building relationships if you go in there, listen, contribute, participate, okay? And become part of this ecosystem of building relationships. I want to talk about something because I think it's important. And as you know, I'm very passionate about our culture and how we break through a lot of the social condition and a lot of the generational cursing, for lack of a better word, a lot of the things that we adopted from our parents that no longer work. They worked at a particular time, but you talked about being uncomfortable and being the only Latino in some of those rooms and being the only guy from the hood, for lack of a better word, right? How were you able to overcome that uncomfortable feeling while you were in the space? What was it that you adopted, and how do you deal with that now?
Gratitude, just gratitude and humility, combined with the confidence that I do belong in these places, right? We were at the Vanderbilt. That was our meeting, right? When you came to Puerto Rico, at the Vanderbilt Hotel, and I have been going to those types of places before I could necessarily afford it, right? I tell this story all the time. I was flying first class when I couldn't afford it because I knew that I belonged there, right? And so that's a big distinction. Whereas some people feel out of place. There's someone on my team. I'm not going to call them out, but there was a time when we first started working together, and I would tell him, "Hey, meet me at the Vanderbilt. Meet me here," and they would keep telling him that the places I was inviting him to were closed. Another Latino from our community, and that was because he was acting like he wasn't supposed to be there. He was asking permission, and so these places, for better or for worse, relationships are very exclusive. And so I would have meetings with him, and every time, and it happened in Puerto Rico, it happened in Miami, I think it might have even happened in New York, the establishments would tell him, oh, no, we're closed, or no, I don't think you have a reservation. Somebody has to come get you, right? And that was because your way of being has to match the room that you're in. And that it's not to say that you have to be cocky or you have to be arrogant, but you do need to know where it is that you want to be, and then embody that. And back to your first point about learning from people, right? One of the events that I went to when I invested in myself was Warren Buffett's shareholder conference. So I got to see Warren Buffett probably for the last time. I don't think he's going to be doing them in person anymore with COVID and with his age. But I was able to see Warren Buffett live. And it's not like I was in a room with him one-on-one. You're in a really big stadium, a big venue. But I was able to see his way of being. And Bill Gates was in the audience, who's on his board, and he acknowledged Bill Gates. And then he had a whole section where he was acknowledging people, everyone on his team, all these people that I never heard of. And he's in this big stadium, and he's acknowledging everyone on his team, like down to the secretary, right? And so, I probably learned a few things about investing. It was a long conference, but one of the biggest things that I learned was his way of being. He was acknowledging the people on his team and showing love to them, right? So, to circle back, I mean, that is the key to leveling yourself up and to getting into bigger and better rooms, is to not only pay attention to what people are saying, but how they're saying it and who they're being, right? And I think that's probably the key distinction and the key thing that's helped me level up in my career, is not only learning the skills, right? The skills are great, the skills are sexy, right? But also learning the personal development and the personality skills to interact with people on a higher level.
Yeah, and that's so important, because the reality is that neither one of us, my background, how I grew up, we were not exposed to that as a kid, right? We were not, my parents didn't have a formal education. Mother had a 6th grade education. Father had a third grade education. I literally have to, strap my boots on the ground type of deal, and raise myself up and forge myself through life, right? So I was, as a kid and even as a young adult, I was not exposed to people like a Warren Buffett. In fact, many of the people that I'm exposed to today, it was something that I had to become comfortable at doing. And along the way, I had to do a lot of observing and learning the way they behave, the way they interacted, the way they acknowledge people, the way they recognize something,
One of the other big things, just to give advice maybe to younger people in our audience, being really careful and intentional with the music and podcasts and videos that you listen to has really been a game changer for me. I've unsubscribed from all sorts of stuff that I used to listen to when I was younger. I barely listen to hip hop anymore. I usually just listen to songs that don't have words, because I don't want my brain to be programmed that way. And now you can have Warren Buffett as a mentor. You can load up a YouTube playlist, and that can be the person that you're listening to. So really being intentional with the music, the podcasts, and YouTube videos that you listen to.
And even your social media, even who you follow on social media.
Yes.
I have created boundaries and really allow my life to be a temple, to be a shrine, to where everything is censored. The people I follow, the people I associate with, the music I listen to, the places I go to, okay, the food I eat. I apply to what I call the 5 pillars: the physical, the mental, the emotional, the spiritual, and the financial. And I attend to those 5 pillars every single day. It is something that has helped me step out from a state of survival into a single state of consciousness, and being here, present, and in the now, and being available and seeing the world with clarity. Okay. Where I came from, my parents lived in a state of alert all the time. They were in a state of survival. So there was no peace. There was no creativity. And when you are living in that state, you miss out on every opportunity that is before you, because you can't see it. You can't see the world in chaos.
And so that state of survival, right? When you're on social media, those algorithms are giving you negative things because a negative thing is going to get more engagement than a positive thing, right? You have a perfect picture, it might get 100 likes. You have a negative picture, you have something about politics or something about the vaccine or something controversial, and you're going to get 1,000 likes, right? And that's because negativity, that survival instinct, is what triggers human interaction, right? If the house is on fire, I have to take action. If the house is perfect, well, I can just stay here and sit here and I don't have to press the like button or comment, right? So social media is a really dangerous tool, and I don't think humans have evolved to be able to interact with these tools effectively. So you can't be scared to unfollow things. Even I was watching on YouTube recently, it was a tech reviewer. His name is Linus, and he's like a Microsoft guy, and he just made this video, and even the content was intellectual, was kind of about technology, but he was just being so negative that I went into my YouTube algorithm and I was like, okay, am I following this guy? I'm not even following him. They just prompted me. Okay, don't recommend this channel, right? But I will block, unsubscribe, unfollow anyone if they're putting things negative, because they're going to put those things into your subconscious.
Absolutely. Anthony, to be respectful of your time and to get back on track into our interview, let me you go to Puerto Rico, you do a lot of incredible humanitarian causes there. You begin your project of Disrupt the University, you establish your business, but there was also some tax advantages that Puerto Rico offer you as a business person to stay there in Puerto Rico. Can we talk a little bit about that and what those advantages are? And that was also a decision maker in you staying there permanently as a resident of Puerto Rico now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I didn't know about the tax incentives when I came down here, but once I found out about them, I was like, well, if anybody's going to get some tax incentives, we got to get a second generation New Eurekan to come back and get these shits. But yeah, so we signed up for the Act 20, Act 22 program. It's now called Act 60. And essentially there's two benefits. So number one is 0% capital gains tax. So that means any money that you make from crypto investing, any money that you make from stock investing, or any passive investment, it's 0% capital gains. The second part of the law is a 4% tax on service export. So any service export is when you have a marketing company or an education company, a consulting company, and you're exporting services, right? So any situation you're selling digital goods, digital products, you are going to be in an extremely unfair advantage of anywhere else in the world to relocate your company right here to Puerto Rico. And a lot of people don't know this, but Microsoft, every single license that they print for their software comes out of Puerto Rico. And they get an insane tax incentive by issuing their licenses from here in Puerto Rico. So it's a 4% corporate tax. What does that look like as an individual? Well, if you wanted to move down here, the first thing that you'd have to do is donate $10,000 per year to a charity. So you have to be having, I guess, a minimum of a $10,000 per year tax burden, because if not, well, then it doesn't really make sense to you come down here and pay $10,000 to a charity. In addition to that, they want you to hire employees here on the island. They want you to contribute to the economy. They want you to buy property here on the island. So there's a few rules and stipulations for you to be in good faith with the law and the regulations. But essentially, you can lower your tax burden from maybe a 40 or 50%, depending on what tax bracket you're in, down to just 4% and that 0% on your investment. So it's really, really attractive. I've been talking to my wife and talking about moving to Texas because I really like Texas's stance on freedom and their politics. But I told her at least we got to be down here at least like 5 years. I got to make some tax-free money before we leave or go anywhere. But the tax benefits aside, Puerto Rico is really a beautiful place. I love the fact that I'm literally living in paradise. There's no winter here. There's beautiful, amazing beaches, and you can kind of get the best of both worlds. There's a city life. There's great hotels and resorts and restaurants. But then you can hop in your car and you can go to a beach where you feel like you're in the Bahamas or something. So it's really definitely a good work-life balance and a good culture. And I'm happy to be able to be a part of the economy down here. So I remember when I first came down to Puerto Rico, I wanted to come back, but I didn't necessarily have a plan, right? So I came to Puerto Rico the first time, we did this humanitarian stuff, and then I went back to New York, and for the first, 5 or 6 months, I was in New York City trying to run a social impact focused company that was going to impact Puerto Rico in some positive way. And I really didn't know how to do that. I didn't really have the connections or the knowledge of the ecosystem down here. And I said, all right, you know what? I'm just going to move to Puerto Rico and I'll figure it out. And at a bare minimum, when I buy my coffee at Starbucks, that money will go back into the economy and maybe I'll meet somebody while I'm there. And then there'll be a domino effect. And so that's pretty much what I did. There's a few more steps along the way. I had a column for Forbes at the time. So I used my column to interview on my podcast the top influencers in the startup ecosystem in Puerto Rico. And that was before I moved down there. So I was in New York and I interviewed Sophia Stolberg, who created Piloto 151. It's like the WeWork of Puerto Rico. I interviewed Sebastian from Parallel 18. It's an investment firm down here. So I interviewed all these key people and I started connecting the dots. And then I wrote this article in Forbes. And then when I came to Puerto Rico, the first week or two that I was here, the article gets published. So this article gets published, it gets picked up in all the local Puerto Rico newsletters and WhatsApp groups and Telegram groups, and it was why digital nomads should look at Puerto Rico as a place to relocate. And then I gave shout outs to all the people that I had interviewed and gave promotion to all their companies. And then that laid the groundwork for me working with them. And then that same year, we hosted the first Disrupt Puerto Rico conference, where we had entrepreneurs from all around the world fly to Puerto Rico and share their knowledge and their experience. We sold tickets to people from around the world who could come to the event. And then we gave scholarships to local students here in Puerto Rico so that they could attend the event. And that was one of the things, too, that I noticed on one of my first trips before I moved here. I was staying at the Vanderbilt Hotel. I was going to the blockchain, it was called Porto Crypto, like blockchain Puerto Rico utopia, right? No taxes, right? And I was at this event and it was $3,000 for one ticket. And I remember talking to some locals here, and they were like, and even for me, like, that's an exorbitant amount of money for a conference ticket, for a 2-day conference. And I remember talking to some locals, and they were like, the people here, there is no way that they will be able to afford this conference ticket, right? And so it's great that all this blockchain stuff is happening here, but the local economy, they're really locked out. So that's why when we started the Disrupt events, we really wanted to make sure that there was a scholarship option to be able to get young kids and young people access to the programs, and we've been doing that ever since.
I love that. Now let's get into the nitty gritty stuff. Okay, cryptocurrency.
What coin should I buy?
NFT stocks.
Yeah.
Okay, give us a rundown of what to look for, what each one of them is, and what are the opportunities.
So the digital economy and a lot of the career skills and things that we've been discussing so far, as far as business and entrepreneurship, those are the skills and the tools that you need to make money, right? But one of my favorite quotes is, again, from Warren Buffett. It's, if you don't learn how to make money while you sleep, you will work until the day that you die. So you can make a lot of money, and you can make a lot of money in entrepreneurship. You can make a lot of money in tech, right? But if you don't have a way to take your money and let it work for you and put it into assets that grow, well, then you're going to be on the hamster wheel for the rest of your life. And then that's why the importance of investing is one of the things that we preach here at Latino Wall Street. So we started Latino Wall Street shortly after I moved to Puerto Rico, and we now have over 100,000 students all around the world, and we teach stock market investing, options trading, stock trading, day trading, and then also crypto, right? And crypto is really, really important because, we take it for granted in the United States that when you walk into a bank and you show your ID, they give you an account. It's a really straightforward process if you live in the United States. But in emerging markets, specifically in Latin America, there's a big problem with people being underbanked and with them not being able to participate in that digital economy, what we were talking about earlier, right? If you live in Venezuela, it's really hard to do commerce with people outside of the world. Cryptocurrency alleviates all that. So with a cryptocurrency wallet, you can download a free app on your phone. You don't need to upload an ID. You don't need to upload your birth certificate or anything. You don't even have to put in your email address. You can literally open up a cryptocurrency wallet and start sending and receiving payments worldwide in an instant, right? And you can't even really do that with the traditional banking system, right? Yeah, you might be able to move a few $1,000s around, but once you start adding digits to this, and I think you can probably relate, Peter. They're going to want you to come into the bank. They're going to want to know why you're sending all this money and who you're sending it to. And it's really, I mean, for me, it's only been happening recently that I've been sending transactions of that size. And it's really scary because it's like, what do you mean you need to know who I'm sending this to and why? Like, what is this your business? I had Chase Manhattan tell me that I had to go into a branch. And I live in Puerto Rico. There's no branches here. I was like, I'm not getting on a plane to send this transfer. And so, long story short, I found another way to move the funds around. But, when your money's in the bank, it's not really your money, if I had to sum it up for you. And especially in this world where we're in political...
You relinquish your rights to your money, basically.
No, it's not your money. It's not your money. The government can send a letter to the bank and say, hey, Peter's a bad guy. That money's not his. You have to give it to us. And the banks will comply. And we've actually seen this in COVID. I interviewed Ian Smith, who runs a gym in New Jersey that refused to lock down during COVID. And they stole $140,000 from his legal defense fund. They stole it. Wow. Governor of New Jersey by sending a letter. So, cryptocurrency alleviates that. It's called capital controls. You can Google the term. And it's really something that traditionally you only worried about when you lived in Venezuela or Africa, an emerging market. But honestly, people around the world need to start worrying about it because we don't know if America's going to be number one. I hope it is. I'm really patriotic and I love freedom and everything that America stands for. But China looks very aggressive in them wanting to become the number one superpower in the world, right? And so are other players, India and Russia, and there are a lot of other players that are trying to become number one. You compound that with the excessive amount of money that has been printed in this pandemic, and now you have the value of your money evaporating, right? So it looks like, oh, wow, this is great. Cryptocurrency is going to the moon. Oh, wow, this is great. My used car is selling more than the new one cost, right? But those things that we're witnessing, that's inflation and hyperinflation in real time. So people think that they're getting richer, and a lot of people are making a lot of money right now with stocks and crypto. But a lot of that is inflation, and it is hyper wealthy people that are driving this market that are putting their money into cryptocurrency and other assets, whether it's stock or other digital assets, because they're trying to protect their wealth from the insane inflation. For people in your audience that don't know, every time they print a dollar, they're stealing a dollar out of your pocket. Every time they print a dollar, they're diluting the value of any money that you have saved up. And the hyper rich, the hyper wealthy people know this. So that's why there's been a gold rush onto the stocks and cryptocurrency market. We were talking about this in the mid 2020, way before this whole gold rush happened. And I'm so happy because a lot of our students who got in at that time are doing really, really well. We just had our first millionaire student. So that's really exciting. Someone that started with a $5,000 investment was able to cross the 7-figure mark. So stories like that are really exciting. But more than that, it's a protection. Cryptocurrency is a protection for your financial liberty.
Love it. So with all of that in mind, we have Bitcoin, we have NFTs, and we have stocks. I know that we're not predicting, we're not recommending. But what is the in-way to each one of those, and what do you think is the safest one, if any?
So, I mean, depending on your age and depending on your your exposure to risk, right? How risky you are. You should have anywhere between 50% or more of your money in the stock market. Stock market is more safe, it's more reliable, it's more predictable. When it comes to cryptocurrency, it's really a hedge against, like I said, these economic disasters that can happen. And in the meantime, if you've been investing into cryptocurrency the last few years, the gains have outperformed gold. The gains have outperformed the stock market. The gains have outperformed any other asset class. And it also gives you that ability to sort of have money off the grid, so to speak. So it's a protection and it's a hedge. The crypto gaming space, and now Facebook called it the metaverse, right?
Right.
That space is really, really, really heating up as people spend more time at home. The time that they spend online becomes more valuable, whether that's buying digital Nikes on an online game or some sort of online world or community. And it's so interesting because that's how cryptocurrency actually started. Bitcoin, one of the first ever use cases, Bitcoin used to be useless, right? Like the guy that sold the first pizza, they make fun of him that he accepted Bitcoin for it or whatever. But at that time, you would be lucky to get a pizza for Bitcoin. Like, it wasn't easy to exchange this digital good for a real world product or service. Fast forward to now, people are spending more time online ever than they ever have. People are spending time in Fortnite. They're spending time in Grand Theft Auto and all these online games, these online worlds and communities. Sure. And so what these digital assets are being used for is things inside of those games, things inside of those worlds. And if you think about it, even Instagram and TikTok, these are all digital games. They're all digital environments, right? People will pay for a blue check mark next to their name. People will pay for likes and followers and to get a shout out and to do a collaboration and for clout and for digital marketing and to have a fancy profile picture. There's all these things that people are investing in. And the thing that I love the most, the quote that I love the most is you don't need to put makeup on it as long as you have a makeup filter. Right? There's girls now that they don't even have to put makeup on. There's an app and they take a picture and then they add the makeup later, right? Yeah. Because it doesn't matter how you look in the real world. It matters how you look online. So this form of social currency is now becoming ever more valuable. And that's what the introduction and the hype of NFTs is all about. It is digital assets that are in the cloud that are now representative. I mean, if you look behind you, you have art behind you, right? And you purchase those art pieces, right? Well, this is another way to purchase art or purchase collectibles. But now you're able to sell them in an instant. It would probably take you a long time to sell your art. You'd have to go to an exposition. You'd have to get people to bid on it, etc., right? Well, with an NFT, you can put it onto a marketplace and sell it digitally and transfer it to someone in another country instantaneously. So that's the power of digital NFTs and digital collectibles. It's also the power of having something be unique and non-fungible, right? So NFT stands for non-fungible token. And if you think about it, if you had $2, right? I don't care which $100 bill you give me, right? As long as it's 100. With an NFT, you do care which one it is. It's almost like a collectible coin, right? Where an older coin might be worth more than a newer coin, or a passport or an ID, right? And cryptocurrency is actually being used for that in emerging markets, where you could have a digital wallet, a digital representation of your passport, and then that can grant you access to different places, whether it be travel or experiences, digital tickets, right? There's all these different applications for now taking things that are digital and having them unlock things in the physical world. And one of the most popular projects is the Bored Ape Yacht Club, where owning that NFT, it's a picture of an ape, and there's all these different pictures of apes, I think 10,000, right? But owning one of them, which they now cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, unlocks you access to go to a yacht club, a real yacht club in real life, and dock your boats in Miami, right? So now these digital goods are now being used in the real world. That's exciting. But what's even more exciting is now when people are going to start spending more and more time online in virtual reality, in like The Sims. When I was a kid, it was called The Sims, right? They're spending more time in these virtual worlds. now people are going to want to pay to go to a digital yacht club. So, okay, great, I can go to the real yacht club, but why would I go to the real yacht club when I can only have one or two girlfriends, when I can go to the digital yacht club and I can have an alien as my girlfriend, right? She could fly down on a spaceship or a flying saucer, right? So these digital experiences, while kids are spending more and more time here, it's going to become more valuable than the real world. It's actually a little scary, but this is something that's happening. This is something that is coming. So if you have kids, which I have one on the way, I say protect your kids from the metaverse. But if you're an investor or an entrepreneur and you're trying to take advantage from this shift in culture and the shift in opportunity, it is literally the new Wild Wild West.
Love it. And I love that term, shift in culture and shift in opportunity. And that's what we're all about. You know, we have to stay connected to the times. We have to change with times. We have to grow. We have to evolve. We have to change. And in order to be able to take opportunities, we have to be in the know. Anthony, thank you. Thank you so much. Let's close up. Let's wrap up with telling us a little bit about what Latino Wall Street is, how can people sign up, and who is your perfect avatar for that space?
Absolutely. So you can go to latinowallstreet.com. We're the #1 platform to learn about stocks and cryptocurrency in Spanish, but we also do have programs in English. And if you want to learn more about the programs in English, go to wallstreetuniversity.com. We have a ton of free classes that you can take. And then we have programs starting as low as $100 to start learning.
Tony Delgado, entrepreneur, disruptor, philanthropist, humanitarians. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Tony.
All right. Thank you, Peter. Thank you so much for having me on. Thank you to your audience for listening. If you guys made it this far, well, then congratulations, because I hope that I provided some value and dropped some knowledge bombs. And if you guys have any questions for me, hit me up on social media at Disrupt CEO. Shoot me a DM. I do my best to get it back to everybody.
Thank you, Tony.